All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you are. Thank you for attending the AMCA Young Professionals November 2016 installment of our webinar series. This month's webinar is Extend Yourself Beyond the University, presented by Dr. Roxanne Connolly. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. First, if you have any audio problems, you can call in at any time on your phone. The number and access code are going to be listed in the chat box on the left side of the screen. I'm going to paste it in right now for everyone to see. Next, during the presentation, please submit your questions to Dr. Connolly via the chat box on the bottom left side of the screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar during the Q&A section. And third, there will be a quick survey at the end of the webinar. If you have any comments on this presentation or an idea for a future webinar topic, please let us know. Now, it's time to introduce our expert, Dr. Roxanne Connolly. Dr. Connolly is a professor and Extension State Specialist of Medical Entomology at the University of Florida. She specializes in mosquito-borne diseases in the U.S., mosquito control, and mosquito biology. She works with mosquito control agencies, county health departments, and county extension offices statewide and provides training in mosquito identification and on other topics in medical entomology. Now, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Roxanne Connolly. I'm going to go ahead and load up the slides. Prepare it.
Okay, thank you, Levy, for the introduction. And I just want to say thanks to Levy and Kendall and Carrie and Christy for all you do for the young professionals. This is the kind of activity I really wish I had when I was very young in the profession, and I applaud you for doing this. What I want to talk about today is extending yourself beyond the university. And you'll see this word extend or extension quite a bit. That's the theme of today. But this is for professional development. And I see I have an error in my first slide. That's awful, under professional development. So overlooking that, what I'm trying to do today is bring you some personal experiences and ideas about preparing your life beyond the university classroom. And we're really going to touch on three areas. First of all, just a brief introduction on what extension is, and then the fact that you're probably already all doing extension. And then really the focus is extending yourself beyond what you're learning in the classroom. And I hope there'll be an item or two that you can take away that's going to stay with you and that'll be beneficial for you in your near future. First, just a little bit of background about where I'm located. I'm a faculty member at the University of Florida, which is a land-grant university, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm in the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, which is also within that is the entomology department. And then I'm actually located at a research and education center called the Florida Medical Entomology Laboratory. We have about 12 faculty here. We have graduate students on site, and we have staff to help support the research we do here. And most everyone here works on mosquitoes or mosquito-borne diseases, mosquito ecology, the real mosquito focus here. And what I really want to talk about is how we are involved from this lab in extension. For all universities, or most universities engage in some aspect of research and teaching. And then when we look at what we call the land-grant university, and there's over 100 of those nationwide, there's a third mission involved in the system, and that's called extension. Through extension, or the land-grant colleges basically take the research that is being conducted and give that to the public. But basically, it's research that's done that will benefit the public in some way, and our role in extension is basically interpreting what we do, telling people, here's what we're spending our money on and here's what it means to you. Within these land-grant universities, there's one in every state. There's also this network of what we call the Cooperative Extension System, and this includes the county extension offices. If you haven't heard of those before, look them up in your own area, because you should be able to easily find the county extension office in whatever county you're living in, or one that's nearby. Extension and land-grant universities really came out of this need back in the 1800s for agricultural and technical education in the U.S. So it basically, a lot of the institutions that were teaching these more traditional classroom curricula, they changed that a bit so that higher education was going to be available to agricultural and industrial workers. So the idea was to take practical education that has direct relevance on people's lives and teach and conduct research in those areas. Specifically, Extension provides non-formal education and learning activities to people through the country. And when I say non-formal, I'm talking about something that's not for college credit. It's really more practical information. And you'll see the slide here. It says that this goes to farmers and other residents of rural communities and people in urban areas. And it's really evolved from the needs back in the 1800s to what it is today. So in the 1800s, you really needed good research to get to the farmers who were growing corn or soybeans or whatever they were growing. So they needed information to help them improve their practices, and that's changed over the years. Now it's not just the farmer or the citrus grower or the rice grower that we're working with. It's other things, and public health is one of those. My specialty here is using public health information, public health research, and getting that to the people who need it. What repellents should we wear? How do we reduce mosquitoes in our yards? So really, Extension answers a broad range of questions. And just to give you an idea here of the extent of this network, again, you can see there's at least one and sometimes two universities within a state that is a land-grant university associated with county extension. So it's quite a strong network. And a lot of you may, if you haven't been involved in extension, you might have even heard of something like 4-H, which is a part of extension. And certainly this is some of the early days of extension. You can see they're really involved in getting kids used to working with animals, conducting science experiments, being a homemaker, these types of things. Life skills is really what they were teaching, and certainly they still do that. There's a little more modern type of information that comes through 4-H now, but still they're considered life skills, and it gets kids used to working with people and animals and getting their hands on things outside of their normal school activities, and the idea is to get them better prepared for adult life outside of school. So, again, in Extension, we're extending university research to the public, and there's a range of sort of job roles within Extension. One is a specialist, and as Levy mentioned, that's what my role is. So I'm a specialist in medical entomology, and my job is to create information, conduct research that provides information that I give to the county agents, and then the county agents then disseminate that knowledge to the general public. Another group I work with are the Florida Mosquito Control Programs and Public Health. So if there are research questions they have that we can address, then we do that, and then we give the information right back to them. That's the whole point of this. Also within Extension, you do have county agents. There are positions called program assistants where you may work with a county agent to help them with a specific program. And then certainly they really utilize a volunteer network extensively. So even if you aren't at a land-grant university, this is one way to really get involved with some of the things I'm going to talk about later is by volunteering with an extension office to help with some of their educational programs. The idea is we provide fact, evidence-based information we don't just go out and say, I think you should wear lemon eucalyptus oil. We have to have a reason for why we're making these recommendations, and it needs to come out of research that's conducted at a university. Within Extension, we also do research and demonstration. So as I mentioned, if someone asks me, well, how do I kill mosquitoes in a bromeliad plant? And if I don't have an answer to that, then I can set up a research project, go and look and see what's best, and then provide that information back. So it's not just providing the information. Sometimes we actually get to do the research. And the idea here is it should be non-biased expertise from the university. We're probably most known from a while back for the number of fact sheets and brochures that are developed, because, again, it is education-based. And we laugh sometimes about how there's a fact sheet for everything, and there's even a fact sheet about how to develop a brochure. The website I've listed here, EDIS, that's the University of Florida's system for publishing the fact sheets that come out of the research centers and the extension offices. And if you go to that website and put the word mosquito in the search engine, you'll probably come up with 40 or 50 different documents. And they're written to various levels. Some of them are very basic. Some of them are a little more specific. Some of them are on specific mosquito species. But that is the way we get our fact sheets out. But Extension is more than just fact sheets and brochures. Certainly we do workshops for the public, and then we do in-service trainings where, again, we're training the trainer. We're training people to go out and spread whatever information we need to have disseminated. We give that to others so they can teach others as well. And I've come to realize how much public health and vector control relies on Extension, whether it's the official extension associated with the university or not. You can be doing Extension no matter where you're working. If you are extending scientific information to the public, then you are doing Extension. And at least lately, there's been more of an emphasis this year in particular on how important Extension is. When it comes to something like Zika virus showing up in the U.S., suddenly there's this huge demand for not just having a fact sheet, but getting information out to the public on how to reduce container mosquitoes around the home. So having more people out there giving this information to people certainly is helping public health and vector control. There's a lot of questions people have about mosquito control. They don't understand things because they've never paid attention to it before. So it's very important for us to get the right information out to talk about how mosquito control or vector control is conducted. Okay, so that was a little bit of background about what Extension is. Now I really want to kind of get into the professional development portion of the webinar, and I really like this quote here because I think it's kind of the umbrella for everything that I'm going to talk about. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And, to me what that means is you're going to focus most of your time on getting ready for this task you have to do. You want to do it well. You want to do it correctly. You want to be prepared for it. So, it's not just a quick, let me go gather some information and go throw it out here. It's really learning the information, presenting it in the correct way, and then being able to answer questions. So I think this really does kind of sum up everything I want to talk about. So these are just Roxanne Conley's 4 ideas that I actually pulled from several different types of documents that I'll tell you about. And I think these are really where I want to go with talking about extending yourself beyond the classroom. So we'll talk about being a good citizen, having a goal towards distinction, doing more than getting by, and being an extension agent wherever you go. So the first of these, I actually pulled some of these from what's called the Extension Workers Code. And if you have a link here if you ever want to go look at it. But this was written in 1922. And some of the items included there I'm going to talk about today, and they're pertinent, they're relevant. I mean, it's amazing how many things are listed there are things I would pass on to my students or to people who were interested in developing their professional lives. So some of those from that list that I'll be talking about include thinking things over, believing in your work, making clear, concise talks, not being afraid to say I don't know, knowing your audience, your state, your county, and I would say your country, using failures as stepping stones. I think that's very important. Doing more than getting by, which means quality over quantity. And then I just stuck this one in here because I thought it was kind of funny, smoke at the proper time and place. So apparently in 1922 when this was written, I guess it was common practice to have a cigar or a cigarette in their mouth when the county agents were giving lectures or demonstrations or judging livestock events. So it says in the manual here, there was a letter to the director of the extension office complaining about a county agent and said, he really needs to spend more time on judging the livestock than focusing on smoking his weed. So I thought it was kind of I guess it's still pertinent. Most of us would not be in a place where we would have a cigarette in our mouth while we're talking, but there's a proper time and place for everything. So let's talk about being a good citizen. And, I'm not just talking about voting and recycling and stopping for the school bus, but be a good citizen of the things you're a part of. And I want to start with AMCA, AMCA being your association. One of the things that we realized several years ago is that we were not being, at AMCA, we were not being good citizens to young professionals, and you all know what you are. It's not just students, but people who come to the meeting for the first time. It's very intimidating, and we needed a friendlier format for young professionals. So now, you are part of this association. It's yours. You're not on the edges. You are a member here. So be a good citizen of the association. When you have an opportunity, talk about what AMCA does and maybe any ways it may benefit you. Do the same thing for your employer and your school. So I'm not just talking about going to football games and cheering for your team, but talk if you have an opportunity in public. For example, if you're in the grocery store and it happens. Somebody is looking and saying, oh, my goodness, I don't know what repellent to use. You could say, well, my university has done this, and here's what they recommend. So you can look for opportunities to promote your school or your employer and talk about the things that they do. Vector control as a profession is important, and your voice about it is too. Vector control comes under a lot of scrutiny. A lot of people don't understand it, and the more informed you are, and the better you can explain how vector control works, the more professional it makes our, what we do, and I think that's very important. This year with Zika being in Miami, there's been a lot of criticism about mosquito control, and it's been very important to make sure that we let people know that decisions are being made based on surveillance. It's not just going out and spraying on a schedule. So there's a lot of ways you can be a good citizen of the profession. Represent your associations respectfully and professionally. And when I say associations here, I don't mean just professional associations, but anything you do. If you're involved in a local civic club or a community that goes group that goes out and helps other people, make sure you represent yourself and that group very professional. If there's something about them you don't like, don't talk about it to others in public. Go talk to your group and help fix whatever that is you don't like. Again, that's what we did with AMCA. We didn't like the fact that we felt like it wasn't a friendly place for students or young professionals, so we did something to change it. And I would say the same thing about medical entomology. Just remember it's your profession and promote it that way as often as you can. The other part about being a good citizen is being involved in communities in leadership roles. And I don't necessarily mean, being the mayor or the president of your community or whatever. Just a leader. We know there are people. I'll give you an example in my own neighborhood. I don't really call myself a leader, but I'm known as the mosquito person. They know who I work for. They ask me about what is the mosquito plane doing. They asked me last week, who should I vote for mosquito commissioner? So they've come to know me as someone who knows about mosquito control, and they ask me about it. And so if something happened, and so, for example, with Zika coming into Florida this year, I got a lot of questions from my neighborhood. They didn't know, that they trusted me because they knew that I knew things about it. So I think any opportunity you have to be recognized as an expert, even on a very small level like your own neighborhood, I think that's very helpful. Wear a mosquito T-shirt. Let people ask you about it. But volunteer in your community. And if your community right now is the university, make sure other students who aren't in your field, know that you are the person to come to for those types of questions. And just remember things like, you may publish something and you may consider yourself an expert, but just because you publish it, it doesn't mean people know about it. So if you're publishing papers, probably most of the people in our communities aren't going to be reading those papers. So do your best to promote yourself, at a level that the people you're talking to can understand, so that they recognize you as a community leader. And the reason I'm kind of focused on this right now, we're currently conducting research in a local community where we're looking at the effectiveness community leaders have when it comes to not just getting information out about mosquitoes, but actually getting people to change their behavior. So we've just started this program, and we're having some of our community leaders who are going to be talking with people about ways they can get rid of mosquitoes, and kind of looking at what success we can have with that as compared to, say, a stranger coming into a neighborhood and trying to talk to you about what to do about your mosquitoes. So I certainly encourage you to get involved anytime you can. Under the topic of being a good citizen, I would say use failures as stepping stones. And just think about, as devastating sometimes as things may seem, they rarely are as bad as you think. And I'm going to talk about 3 mistakes I've made. I've certainly made more than that, but 3 that have never left me. They stick with me professionally. And, I felt bad about them at the time, but I've learned from them, and I've changed the way I do things. And the first mistake I wanted to talk about was at my job interview here. I was very focused on presenting the research that I conducted when I was in graduate school, and what I could do in a job, in my role here. And I was living, so the job interview was here in Florida. I was living in Louisiana at the time. I went to school at LSU, and I had, there was an SLE epidemic going on, and I forgot to actually look into what actually was happening at that moment. I was so focused on talking about my research on anopheles, which have nothing to do with SLE, that I didn't prepare myself for that. And at the end, when the questions came up, John Day asked me, I think the question was, I know that SLE is going on in Louisiana right now. Is the epidemic over? And I was so unprepared. I don't even remember what I said. I know it was something stupid, but it wasn't the right answer because I wasn't prepared, and I should have just said, I don't know. And I've been working with John for 20 years, and I've never had the courage to ask him what he thought about that answer. I still got the job, but it was something that made me realize, even though I was very prepared by presenting the research I had done, I wasn't prepared for the news of what was actually going on around me at the time. So I would say hopefully you can learn from that mistake that I made. The second one I want to mention is what's called an in-service training. And again, this is what I do for county extension agents. So I would offer them, they would come to my lab and we do a training, and then ideally they take that information back and they develop their own programs from it. And the first time it happened, I really didn't know my audience. I didn't know any of the agents who were coming in. I didn't know their backgrounds. I didn't know if I just assumed everybody had experience with mosquitoes. And most of the people who showed up here were horticulture agents. Some of them were citrus agents. So they worked on plants or something other than mosquitoes. And I realized about 10 minutes into the talk that I was talking at a level that I lost them right away. So I certainly learned a lot from that. And then the last one, the last big mistake was a quote in the newspaper. And I'll talk a little more about newspaper reporters in just a minute. But not long after I got here, I had a call from a reporter. There was a major emergence of salt marsh mosquitoes in a county south of us, and the mosquito control director had been quoted as saying that salt marsh mosquitoes can fly 30 or 40 miles inland. And at the time, again, I knew anopheles very well, but I didn't know much about salt marsh mosquitoes. And when the reporter asked me if I agreed with that, I said no, and it was a young and stupid thing to do. And I know now, I learned quickly that these salt marsh mosquitoes can fly many miles from where their larval habitat is. So in the paper, it looked like a university researcher was contradicting what a mosquito control person had said, and they know their business and I didn't, and so I was now forevermore very careful in what I say to reporters and how that may be quoted in the newspaper. So again, those are things that I have used as stepping stones to change the way that I do my job now. Okay, being a good citizen also means knowing your state, county, and country. And again, this gets back to what I mentioned about John Day asking me about that SLE epidemic. I should have known. I should have been aware of what was going on where I was living at the time. And it's not just where you're living. People are going to, when they realize you are studying whatever it is you're studying, probably related to mosquitoes, they're probably never going to ask you about your research. They're going to ask you about the big things that are in the news. And you should be aware of them. Not that you need to be an expert at everything, but you should be aware of, I've pulled a few headlines here. Florida voters weighing in on GM mosquitoes. At least know what the questions are. What are people talking about? You don't necessarily have to have an opinion on it, but you can at least be aware of what people are talking about and provide, when possible, good scientific background on these things. So certainly, and also I'll mention the one at the bottom here, the yellow fever outbreak. People keep saying, well, what's the next big mosquito-borne disease that's going to come to the U.S. And if you kind of look and see what's going on in other countries, this may help you when we see that yellow fever there's an outbreak in another country and there's high numbers and people are traveling to the U.S. That may be something of concern. So those are kinds of things that you really should stay aware of. Okay, again, back to knowing your audience. Clear and concise talks are certainly very helpful when you're talking to people outside of, even inside your own profession, but when you're talking to the public. And I, again, would go back to this spending the 4 hours preparing, and 4 hours is, I just took that from the quote that Lincoln had, but, spend the time preparing for a talk. So even though you may only be talking for 10 minutes, make sure you know everything you've got on every slide and anticipate questions that may be asked. And again, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. As an extension specialist, again, my job is to boil down some of the research we've done here and present that to people who don't know the language. They don't know what a mosquito, maybe they don't know the word proboscis or they don't know lots of mosquito anatomy. I need to get that to a level where people can understand what I'm talking about. And some examples of this, some of them you may be involved in already. If you have ever been to a legislative event, either with AMCA or within your own state, where you're asked to talk to politicians to explain what the needs are for the vector control industry, using words like PCR and DNA, you lose them. And, you really do have to get your language to a level. Somebody said it very well. Explain it as if you would be telling your grandmother what you're doing. So your grandmother may have no idea what mosquito control or vector control is all about. So you have to get it to a level that people can understand. And you're going to be talking to kids or homeowners association. You just have a whole wide range of different people. And, getting practice and how to talk about what you do is very helpful. And some people can never get it boiled down. I mean, I have I have worked with people who do research at a level that I can't understand some of it, and sometimes I can't get enough out of it to help them do a better job of explaining it. We work on it really hard, but sometimes that's very difficult to do. But I would say keep trying, things like that. Talking about news and interviews and being a good citizen, the call from the reporter is often flattering. Someone has told the reporter, oh, yes, please call this person. They know everything there is to know. And that is nice that you're referred to it as an expert, but I would just say be careful about commenting on something, especially if it's outside of your area of expertise or if it's outside of your geographic area. I did see this summer lots and lots of quotes from other places, other counties and other states about what Miami-Dade mosquito control was doing to target Zika mosquitoes. There was a lot of criticism, speculating on what people were doing and why. To that, I would say let Miami-Dade talk about why they're doing it, and then you focus on something else because it's, it's very. You don't want to be contradicting what people are saying within our profession. Certainly you want to understand it, but criticizing what other people are doing is certainly not a good way to be a good citizen. Okay, moving on to what I call the goal towards distinction. Distinction is really kind of standing out from the rest or being the expert. And what I wanted to do here is just give you this year, I'm the chair of our promotion and tenure committee here at the university, and what that is after the first 5 years of being a professor, you basically present a packet of everything you've done, and then there's a committee and your peers who vote on whether or not you should get a promotion and whether or not you should get tenure. I pulled out some of the questions that we look at. These are things that our university has defined as distinction. And a faculty member has to show distinction in a couple of areas. So, they say, are they publishing their work? Do they have graduate students? Are you publishing with your graduate students? So these are the kinds of things that we look for. Leadership roles at professional meetings. Not just are you going to meetings, but when you go to these meetings, are you a chair of a committee? Are you taking leadership roles within your profession? Are you getting funded? Are you reaching your audience? These are the kinds of things that we look for. So from this list, I just pulled out the ones that I think anybody can, in this profession, could apply to themselves. And again, it's are you going to the meetings? Are you speaking there? Are you making sure that your work is known? Are you seeking leadership roles? And not only are you reaching target audiences with your work, but I really think this second part is most important. Our audience is changing their behaviors because of your work. So you can stand up all day and talk about which repellents work and don't work based on your research. But are people actually wearing repellents? That's the thing. We want to make sure that our work is motivating behavior. So I think these are the kinds of things that help us get towards having distinction within our field. And even, are you a good citizen of whatever? Are you a good citizen of AMCA? Are you a good citizen of your county? Whatever it is. Those types of things help you build your career and get to that point where you have achieved distinction. And I would say make your own definition of distinction and then work towards it as a long-term goal. So it's not going to be something you're going to have your first day on the job or a month after you graduate from college. It's something to work towards. Make it the big thing. And not only are you doing these activities, but are they having an impact? Okay, moving on to the next one, more than getting by. So doing things that aren't just the bare minimum. And I'm really going to focus on job interviews. The first one I want to talk about is knowing the business. And what I mean by that is I'm going to use my lab as an example. I mentioned we do research, teaching, and extension. So we put out a job announcement, and the job announcement says you will be doing 50% research and 50% extension. So you know right away, what your job, the kind of umbrella your job is going to fall under. But you need to know, well, what does that mean? You know, what am I going to do in the research? Is it just something I can do on my own? Do you have a program I need to fit into? You know, and what kind of extension things will I be doing? So you need to, you know, don't be afraid to call someone if that's listed on a job announcement. Call and ask them, what does this mean? What would I be doing? So that you can prepare for your job interview. And I say don't wait until the interview because that's happened. I had someone sitting in my office who was here to interview for a job that had an extension role in it. And when they got here, they asked me what extension was. And that's just that didn't get it. You know, you should do the research on the job before you get there to know how to prepare for it. And if you feel strange about calling the person who's listing the job, call somebody else who has a similar job. I mean, there's plenty of expertise out there where you can call and get this information before you show up for an interview. And I would say the interview starts with your first call. And again, from personal experience, the person who had the job that I took here, he was leaving the university to go and run a mosquito control district. And so I called him and I said, hey, can you tell me more about the job at FMEL? And he said, yeah. So he goes through everything related to it. And then at the end, he surprised me and he said, so you tell me, what are you going to, you know, he wasn't even going to be here. He wasn't part of the university anymore, but he said, what are you going to bring to Florida? Why should the university hire you? So he kind of caught me off guard. I was just doing my research to prepare for my interview, and he was already asking me, well, you know, what are you going to bring to us? So just be prepared for those kinds of things if you start looking for information on a job you're going to be applying for. I don't really need to say much more than this. The interviewer knows exactly how many times you look at your phone. I would say if you're addicted to your phone, just don't take it in the interview with you. And the interview isn't over until the job offer is made, and I would say and accepted, because what happens sometime is there may be several people who interview for the job, and somebody gets an offer, and they go back and forth for a while, and then they decide, well, I don't want that job after all. So then they go to the next person on the list. So so what I'm saying here is after your interview, don't be posting things on Facebook or talking to too many other people about the good and the bad of what happened. Wait and see what happens. And don't assume because you don't hear from them right away that you didn't get the job, because sometimes it could be, weeks or months later before you hear from them. So until the job offer is made and someone has accepted it, then I would say the interview is not over. And you're probably being interviewed when you don't know you're being interviewed. And a time when I think this happens quite a bit is at professional meetings. You're talking to people in the hall, you're standing at your poster, and you may be talking about your poster, but that person talking to you could be someone who's going to have a job in the near future, and they may remember what kind of interactions they had with you. So, when you're in a professional meeting, always be thinking about that everybody you're talking to could be someone who's interviewing you for a position. And I just have to put this in, know the primary literature. Sometimes, when students and people who are new in the profession start looking at, so say you have a question, I want to find out what's the best time to make an application of malathion to kill mosquitoes. So you may go and find something that's on Google or that's on the Internet now, but you really need to go back and look at what got them up to that point. So a lot of current things you may find right away. But if there's references in there, please make sure you go back and know who was that original person who did this research. Because a lot of times you'll see that as something gets referenced, the next person just references the reference, and you kind of lose sight of who actually did the first work. So, people look for that. Do you really know the literature of whatever it is you're talking about? So, again, on a job interview, that's very important. And then the last category here, be an extension agent wherever you are and whatever you do. So even though you may not officially be hired as an extension agent, whatever opportunities you have to talk about this profession, do it. And I put this in here maybe because I didn't know where else to put it, but people do notice when you look at your phone. I mean, when I'm up giving a talk and I look out in the audience and I see half of them are on their phones, that hurts a little bit. So just think about that. If you're up there talking, you want people to be listening to you, not doing 2 or 3 things at once. So, give the same respect to speakers as that you would like to have. And I would say look up from your phones every now and then, because you're going to miss the things you would really like to see. There's great things going on around you, and people who are around you, people who are watching you, people who want to know who you are, and if you're looking at your phone, you're just going to miss that. And this was actually from the Extension Workers Code as well, talking about kind of competition with others. The best thing I would say here is promote yourself. Talk about what you do, how you do it well, and what it means, not to criticize others, because I love this quote, you never look good trying to make someone else look bad. I've seen this often in our profession, because there's a lot of competition with the industry. So you may have someone who gets up and says, my product, mosquito oil A, is great, and here's why. And then somebody else gets up and says, well, my product's good, but let me tell you why product A is bad. So that's not the way to do it. If you're going to be in competition with others, just make yourself look good, raise yourself up. No need to talk about whatever other people are doing. And again, kind of getting back to the idea of what extension is, I have 2 things here. One is learning beyond the traditional classroom, and I really recommend that to you. I know that being in school, having a full-time job, having a family, all those things, keep us very busy. But any opportunity you have to do this learning beyond the classroom, I think is very important. And something not related to mosquitoes or vector control at all. These are what I call life credit, not college credit. Things like, you could actually go to an extension office and they have classes on skeet shooting or how to run a meeting or how to balance a checkbook. I mean, all those types of things you can find in communities around you. Critical thinking about other, topics besides public health. I think it certainly helps you to, get your brain off of what it is you're thinking about at that moment. You've got some problem in maybe your research you're trying to solve, and if you start thinking about something else for a little while, sometimes it helps you when you go back to thinking about that research topic. Just get your mind off of it, do something fun, get some life credit here. And also I would encourage you to be involved in teaching beyond the traditional classroom. So you may, if you're in school, you may be a TA for someone and you're teaching a lab. But I would say find a county extension office close to you and volunteer to give a presentation. Just go in and say, hey, I know about mosquitoes and I'd love to talk to a group about dengue or Zika or whatever. County extension offices are always looking for good ideas and ways they can reach their public. If they don't know you, they're not going to know to call you. So reach out to them and just let them know you're available. They have a network called Master Gardeners, and these are volunteers who learn about issues associated with keeping a garden at home, but they extend beyond gardening. And for example, mosquitoes. A lot of times the Master Gardeners ask me, well, how do we control these mosquitoes that are in our plants or that are eating us while we're out doing our gardening? So work with them. I'm sure a lot of them would be happy to have some of your expertise within their educational programs. And again, talk to community leaders with the goal of teaching them to teach. So it gets back to what I was talking about, how if you have someone within a community that people respect and go to, if you can find them, if you can go to that person and say, hey, I've got some information here I really need you to get out to your community. It's about, getting rid of containers in the yard. Find those leaders and talk to them. And I find most times they're very happy to make sure that their community gets this information. So any time you get to do that would be nice. Last slide here. Just want to say that the the young professionals are the future of the public health vector control. You really are. I mean, you are the guys who are going to be doing this, and I want to support you. I know the association wants to support you as much as possible. So right now, most of you are in that 4-hour time period where you're sharpening your axe and you're getting ready, to go out and do what it is you're going to do. We're watching. We're paying attention. This next to last thing here, join a committee somewhere. Get started now. And I can't tell you, again, getting back to this, people being intimidated about asking some of the old-time professionals for help. This is very important here to just show up. And I'll tell you personally how that happened for me. I called Roger Nashi when I was in school, and I said, I want to do something at the AMCA. And he said, okay, well, come to the Training and Education Committee meeting. So at the event, I showed up, and no one was there. The chair wasn't there, no members. It was just me. And Roger came in, and he said, are you really interested in this? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you're the chair now. So that's how I got started in it. So I don't know how often that happens, but again, just showing up sometimes is really all it takes, because a lot of times when these committees meet, they don't know who's out there and who's interested. And if you show up and tell them, I want to do something here, hopefully you're going to have somebody who's going to get you involved and get you started with doing more things within the association. And that's all I have for now. I want to thank you for being a young professional, and I will wait to see if Levy has any questions for me.
Thank you, Dr. Connolly. Right now, we'll begin the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, please submit them into the chat box on the bottom left corner of your screen. All of your questions will be submitted directly to the presenters, and I will read them aloud for Dr. Connolly to answer them. You can go ahead and enter in those questions at any time. And while we wait for the questions to roll in, we do have a few here. So we'll start with the first one. It sounds like the best way to extend ourselves is really in person. But for those of us who may not have the opportunity to go to state association meetings or present a poster at AMCA, are there other ways to reach potential employers or mentors in the industry?
That's a good question, and I would say that there is. One of the things that a lot of people are doing more of now is something like Skype, where you may, I would say, don't be afraid to just call or contact someone to say, I'd really like to talk to you about what I'm doing. Can we meet on Skype? I like that better than even just a conference call, but where you can still see each other's face, you can see expressions. Certainly, you could do that, and just ask them. If it's a research question you have, or you just want to make them aware of who you are, tell them that up front. Just tell them, I'm not able to attend meetings, but I would love, an hour of your time or whatever. And I find that most people in this profession, even though they may not answer you right away because they're doing other things, they're very open to that. I know we do that at our lab. We've had Skype meetings with people in other countries, and those who are place-bound, and we do make time for things like that.
Thank you. Next question here. As an established professional yourself, are you still finding yourself needing to extend yourself beyond what you normally do?
Absolutely. In terms of education, it is, I'm always finding that I need to learn more. And a good example of that is something I'm getting ready to take a workshop in December on GIS. So my expertise is in how to identify mosquitoes, and we're looking at mosquito resistance, but I need to have this skill now to be able to do things within GIS that someone in my lab has been doing that for years. Well, now I've got to learn it. I have to do it myself. So education-wise, I do find that I do continue to have to do things like this, and I enjoy them. I would say the other thing to, on a personal level, I find that I've started to get a break from what I do, and you do need that. It's very important to take a break from what you do. I've been taking art classes, so I think it's, in this profession we're in, I think it just, you don't just stop once you get your job. You do still have to learn new things and get new skills, and I do myself as well.
Thank you. Next question is actually a follow-up from one of the earlier ones. If I am stuck in a lab or office setting where I'm not in a role where I'm being sent to these state association meetings or AMCA, is there a professional way for me to convince my employer to allow me to go?
That's another good question, because a lot of times I have heard people say, well, they're just doing X, they're just entering payroll, so they don't need to go. But I would say, maybe the approach to take is that to better do your job and understand what you're doing and what others around you are doing. It is very important to continue to go to these types of meetings. It gives you I think a more of a sense of community and what's going on. You don't feel so left out. You have people come back from the meeting and they're all talking about it, and then you're there and you haven't gotten to go. So I think making a pitch to your whoever makes that decision that maybe for feeling more like part of the team within the office, that it is important for you to go to these things, and maybe that's actually something that Christy, if you're on the line, that we could work on as part of the YPs. Is could we develop some talking points that specifically addresses that? But because I know there are a lot of people there who don't get to go to the meetings because someone else doesn't think it's necessary. But I think maybe we could come up with some talking points that could then be shared with the young professionals.
Thank you for that. Christy is definitely in attendance. I am trying to find a way to see if I can promote her to speak, but appears that is not the case. I do know that currently, for all those on the line listening, and for that one person who asked the question, the YPs definitely do have many opportunities to extend yourself, including working with the industry companies for funding to get to AMCA. In addition to that, YPs also offer a way for you to join the committee that we have here, and also to be more involved in our social media sites like Facebook or Twitter. If you need to connect with someone, we have that available. The next question here is, how does one strike a balance between promoting yourself well but not appear overly aggressive or arrogant?
Well, I think that sometimes where you may feel like you're being overly aggressive or arrogant, you're not. You may just be used to not talking about yourself and not saying I so much, and really lifting the team up and not just yourself. So I would say, sometimes it could just be that you're not used to doing that, and it is difficult to do. I know in writing my promotion packet, the first time I sent it to my director, he came back and said, "Tell me what you're doing, not what the team is doing." And I think there are times when you can balance this. So for example, let's say you're giving a presentation. At the beginning, you're talking about you and what you've done and how you did it, and at the end you acknowledge that other people helped you. I think that is expected. People do want to hear what you did, and I think sometimes you have to really push that, because if you don't, they may think, oh, well, you were just part of, Dr. Conley's lab, and you didn't really do anything. She did all the work, and now you're just presenting. So I would say just take a step back, maybe practice it on other people with making sure they understand that, you've done the work and that you have the knowledge and the experience. I guess that's the best I can tell you for right now, because it is difficult sometimes if you're not used to it. And maybe you have a network of friends who could tell you if you're being arrogant. But certainly I think most often it goes the other way, where you're not quite being promoting yourself enough.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We have, let's see here, to make sure I didn't skip anyone. We have one last question here before we sign off. Has the society around entomology changed in any way in regards to being a woman in entomology, extending yourself? Has it been more or less difficult to do this over time as a woman?
I certainly think that in general in entomology that society has changed, and I think you're probably seeing more more of a balance of males and females at any given meeting. It's certainly not that way in vector control yet. I think I will say that I do see some changes. For example, in my own state, we probably have 5 or 6 mosquito control programs that are run by women. Most of them are run by men, but I think women are starting to be accepted more into the profession. I would like to say that some of the things that I think a lot of the experiences that I had coming up to the job I have here, I had a great support at the university. I had someone who really promoted me. He when I did work, he made sure that I was the one, that I got credit, not just him. And he was really in favor of of pushing me forward and saying, hey, she's brilliant and she's done all these wonderful things. I think sometimes we start moving forward and then we take a step back. When I look at kind of the picture of the AMCA, I don't want to be too overcritical. We've had 3 female presidents, and in a 70-something year history now, that doesn't look like we're changing very much, does it? So I think we still have a lot of work to do. I think, but again, I think because we do have some females who are now starting to be mosquito control directors, and who really are really good at what they do, that's only lifting everybody else up.
All right. Thank you for that. And for those who are only calling in and don't have the chat available, Christy did chime in about the industry shadow program, and to remind everyone to apply for it so you can actually get a chance to get your travel funded and by the sponsors at AMCA. With that, we'll conclude the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and wrap up this webinar, Extend Yourself Beyond the University. A recording of this webinar will be made available on our website, which I will go ahead and post here in the chat box. It is amcayps.wordpress.com. And a link will also be posted on our Twitter and Facebook pages. I'll go ahead and post those two as well in the chat box. All right. With that, thank you so much, Dr. Roxanne Connolly, for your time and providing your insight into how new and young professionals can extend themselves in this industry. And thank you, everyone, for attending. My name is Levi Sun. I'm past chair with the AMCA Young Professionals Committee, and I look forward to seeing you all at, hopefully in San Diego or around some YP events. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.